Chapter 7, Co-Creating Relationships, Transforming Dynamics Through Vulnerability. When it comes to relationships, we often put on masks. We hide our fears, our insecurities, and our true feelings, believing that vulnerability is a weakness. But in reality, it's the opposite. Vulnerability is the key to deep, meaningful connection. It's the bridge that allows us to step into true intimacy, breaking down the barriers that keep us isolated from one another. For years, I struggled with this. I believed that as the provider, I needed to be strong, composed, and in control. I kept my fears to myself, convinced that sharing them would make me appear weak. But this facade of strength created a wall between me and my wife. It wasn't until I embraced the power of vulnerability, guided by the principles of Kai-Shen, that our relationship began to transform. One of the most pivotal moments in our marriage came during a particularly difficult time in our financial journey. My wife had been silently carrying the weight of our financial troubles, hiding her fears because she didn't want to burden me. At the same time, I was doing the same, hiding my own anxiety, trying to shield her from the harsh reality of our situation. It was like we were both trapped in our own bubbles, pretending everything was fine, while internally we were drowning. The breakthrough came when she finally broke down, admitting that she couldn't keep up the act anymore. It was a raw, emotional moment, filled with tears and honesty. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, I chose to listen. For the first time in a long time, I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to fix it. I just held her and allowed the truth to come forward. In that moment, something shifted between us. The walls we had built came down, and we found ourselves standing together in the rawness of our shared vulnerability. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real. It was the beginning of a deeper, more authentic connection, one that was rooted in honesty rather than pretense. The Kai-Shen framework isn't just about personal growth. It's about co-creation in every aspect of life, including relationships. It's about blending the logical, clear communication of Kai with the intuitive, heartfelt connection of Shen. When you apply these principles to your interactions, you create a space where true co-creation can occur, a dynamic where both partners feel seen, heard, and valued. 1. Embrace radical honesty. One of the first steps to transforming any relationship is radical honesty. This means being willing to share your truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's about expressing your fears, your desires, and your needs without censoring yourself. Personal story. In our relationship, we had fallen into a pattern of surface-level communication. We talked about logistics, plans, and daily tasks, but avoided the deeper conversations. It wasn't until I started practicing radical honesty, sharing my fears and vulnerabilities, that we began to connect on a deeper level. It was scary at first. I feared judgment and rejection. But what I found was the opposite. My honesty was met with understanding and compassion. Exercise. Choose a quiet time to sit down with your partner. Start the conversation by sharing one fear or concern you've been holding back. Be clear and open, and encourage your partner to do the same. Remember, the goal is not to solve the problem immediately, but to create a safe space for honesty and vulnerability. 2. Co-create solutions together. In many relationships, one partner tends to take on the role of problem solver, while the other might retreat or avoid confrontation. This dynamic can create an imbalance, where one person feels overwhelmed and the other feels disengaged. The Kai-Shen framework encourages a different approach. Co-creation. Instead of trying to fix everything on your own, involve your partner in the process. Treat it as a collaborative effort where both voices are equally valued. Personal story. I used to take on all the financial burdens myself, believing that it was my responsibility alone. This mindset kept my wife out of the loop and created unnecessary stress for both of us. When I started involving her in the decision-making process, asking for her input, sharing my ideas, and listening to her perspective, we found solutions that neither of us could have come up with alone. It became a shared challenge rather than an individual burden. Exercise. Pick a specific issue you're facing as a couple. It could be financial, related to parenting, or about future planning. Set aside time to brainstorm together. Instead of focusing on the problem, focus on potential solutions. Encourage each other to share ideas without judgment and see what new possibilities emerge from your combined perspectives. 3. Practice active listening. Active listening is the art of truly hearing what the other person is saying without interrupting, judging, or planning your response. It's a skill that transforms conversations from surface-level exchanges into meaningful dialogues. When you listen with the intent to understand rather than respond, you create a space where the other person feels valued and respected. Exercise. The next time your partner shares something with you, focus entirely on what they're saying. Resist the urge to interrupt or offer solutions immediately. Instead, reflect back what you heard. What I'm hearing is that you're feeling overwhelmed by our financial situation. Is that right? This simple act of reflection shows that you're fully engaged and interested in understanding their perspective. As we began to practice these principles in our relationship, I noticed a ripple effect. Our dynamic shifted from one of tension and avoidance to one of openness and collaboration. We started to see each other as partners in a shared journey, rather than opponents in a struggle for control. The energy between us softened, and our conversations became more compassionate. It wasn't just about fixing problems. It was about building a deeper connection based on mutual trust and respect. Vulnerability is powerful because it creates space for true intimacy. It's the raw, unfiltered moments that bring us closer together, reminding us that we're not alone in our struggles. By embracing the discomfort of these moments, we allow ourselves to experience the full depth of what a relationship can be. Reflection exercise. Deepening your connection. Identify a vulnerability you're hiding. Take a moment to reflect on something you've been holding back in your relationship. It could be a fear, a desire, or a concern you haven't shared. Create a safe space for sharing. Set aside time to share this vulnerability with your partner. Approach the conversation with an open heart and listen with empathy when they share their own. Notice the shift. Pay attention to how this act of vulnerability changes the dynamic between you. Do you feel more connected, more understood? Reflect on the experience and what you learned about each other. Key takeaway. Co-creating a strong, authentic relationship requires a willingness to embrace vulnerability, practice radical honesty, and involve your partner as an equal collaborator. By applying the principles of the Kai-Shen framework, you can transform the dynamics of your relationship, building a deeper connection rooted in trust, openness, and mutual growth.